Hello? Welcome to Night, where the dark speaks and true stories haunt. This channel brings you real horror experiences, urban legends, and chilling encounters that people have truly lived through. Every episode is based on actual stories, told in a way that pulls you into the shadows. From haunted houses to unsolved disappearances, strange family secrets to ancient curses, we explore the kinds of stories that leave you questioning what's real. Perfect for late night listening or a lonely commute home. Subscribe and let the night in. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Story 1. I deliver lost time. Don't open the box. People think time only moves forward. They're wrong. Sometimes it gets misplaced. And when it does, I'm the one who brings it back. I work for a company you've never heard of. We don't have a name, just a symbol. A circle, broken at the top like an open clock. We don't advertise. We don't need to. People don't call us. Time calls us. Most of my deliveries are simple. A black cube, usually warm to the touch, about the size of a shoebox. The instructions are always the same. 1. Do not open the box. 2. Deliver to the recipient listed. 3. Do not look them in the eye. 4. Return before the hour resets. I used to ask questions. Now I don't. After what happened in Montana, the delivery was marked high sensitivity. Rural house. Coordinates only. No name. A single box humming faintly, with a faint gold mist seeping from the edges. I'd never seen one leak before. My watch began ticking backward the second I picked it up. When I arrived, the place looked abandoned, boarded windows, mail piling up. But there was a light on in the attic. I rang the bell. No answer. Then the door creaked open. No one on the other side. I stepped in and called out. That's when I heard crying. It came from the attic. I climbed the narrow stairs, holding the box in both hands. It was heavier now. The ticking in my watch grew louder with every step. By the time I reached the door, it sounded like a metronome slamming in my skull. The crying stopped. Then my voice, whispered from behind the door. You're too late. I should have turned and run. But the box pulsed in my arms like a heart. The lock on the door clicked open. Inside, a woman sat on the floor, rocking back and forth. She looked maybe 50, but her eyes were ancient, starved of time, if that makes sense. All around her, clocks hung on the walls. Hundreds of them. None of them ticked. I held out the box. Delivery. She didn't move. I set it down and turned to leave. That's when she spoke. Did he beg you to? I froze. Who? She pointed at the wall. At a photo of a boy, maybe 6 years old. Blonde. Smiling. My son, she said. I gave him 5 extra minutes. I didn't understand. What do you mean? She stood slowly, bones creaking. He drowned. In 2002, I screamed for help, but no one came. And then one day, the box showed up, a man in a coat just like yours. He said I could have 5 minutes back. Just 5. And you opened it. She nodded, and she smiled sadly. He drowned again, and again, every night, same 5 minutes. Sometimes he calls for me. Sometimes he laughs. Sometimes he just floats. She looked me in the eye. You brought him back wrong. I turned to leave. The box was open. Inside, a dripping, waterlogged watch, still ticking, and a small, pale handprint burned into the lining. My own hands were soaked. I ran to my car and drove until sunrise. When I got back to headquarters, they wiped my memory. At least they tried. But you can't erase time that's already been delivered. Since then, I've seen things no one should. A woman who ordered 12 seconds of her dead husband's breath. A boy who wanted to hear his dog bark again. A man who paid to relive the moment before he pulled the trigger. Every night, for years, all of them opened the box eventually. They always do. But last night, I delivered one to my old address, my childhood home. There was no name, just a sticky note on the top. Do not open until your mother dies. She died 10 years ago. I called HQ. No answer. I sent a return code. It bounced. The box began to hum. I tried to throw it out, bury it, burn it. It always comes back. Sitting at the foot of my bed, waiting. Sometimes I hear voices from inside. My mother's, mostly. Sometimes mine. Laughing, screaming, begging. I haven't opened it, but I will. I have to, because last night I heard a new voice, one I haven't heard in decades. My brother's. He died when we were kids, fell through the ice. I watched it happen. I never forgave myself. He said, "It wasn't your fault. You didn't let go." I did. He died before I knew that, before I ever told anyone what really happened. So now I'm sitting in the dark, the box on my lap, ticking. I know what they told me. I know the rules. But what if it's not a punishment? What if it's a second chance? What if 5 minutes is enough? Story 2. My entire town is obsessed with an app called Mimic. If someone you know is talking about Mimic, please don't let them download it. This all started when my family moved to this small logging town in the Pacific Northwest about a month ago after my parents' messy divorce. To put it bluntly, my dad found nudes on my mom's phone from multiple guys in our town. She met them through various dating apps, and it destroyed him. He packed up me and my little brother and moved us as far away from our old life as possible to one of those foggy mountain towns where everyone knows your business, and the biggest excitement is usually the high school making it to regionals. Dad developed this intense hatred of technology after everything that happened. No smartphones, no social media. Barely even lets us use his old laptop. As long as it's for homework, he'd say sternly, "I get it. His world fell apart because of what he found on a phone. But it's made fitting in at our new school basically impossible." My first day, I noticed something that struck me as odd. Almost every student was wearing the exact same style of flannel shirt. Rolled up sleeves at the elbow in this very specific way that looked almost ritualistic. They'd even tied their shoelaces in these elaborate flower-shaped knots that must have taken forever to master. "It's from me, Mick," explained Jenny. She was assigned to be my hallway buddy for the first day of school. While her mood was chipper, she had this distant look in her eyes, like she was thinking about something else entirely while talking to me. "Everyone's doing it. You should really get the app. I don't have a phone." She stared at me like I just told her I didn't have lungs. "That's weird. How you keep up with anything?" That afternoon in the cafeteria, I felt an uneasy pit in my stomach form as I watched the other kids. Most of the students were eating their lunch in perfect synchronization. They'd take a bite, chew exactly 7 times, swallow, then repeat. After every swallow, they would look at each other and laugh, like there was some hilarious inside joke that only a few of us weren't in on. The entire room moved like the hive mind. The sound of coordinated chewing echoed off the walls. When I asked my lab partner about it, he just gave me the same empty smile Jenny had given me earlier and said, "Me Mick challenge. You wouldn't understand." My reputation for being phoneless was spreading like a virus. My little brother Danny started complaining constantly at home. Everyone at school thinks I'm a freak. They all have phones, and I'm the only kid without one. I can't do any of the challenges or trends. I just sit alone at lunch while everyone else stares at me. But Dad wouldn't budge. Every time Danny brought it up, Dad would get this look in his eyes and change the subject. I understood his trauma, but watching my 11-year-old brother become more isolated every day was heartbreaking. The challenges I observed at school started innocently enough. Kids would whisper about hashtag Flannel Friday and hashtag 7-Bite Challenge and hashtag Flower Knot Tuesday. Weird and robotic, but harmless. I figured it would blow over like every other social media trend. Then came hashtag Devious Licks. I was sitting in Mr. Frederick's biology class, taking notes on metamorphosis, when I felt something wet and warm slide across the back of my neck. I spun around to find Keith grinning at me with his tongue still slightly hanging out of his mouth. "Got you?" He whispered, like we were playing some perverted game of tag. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Devious licks challenge. "You're supposed to laugh now." I got you, but I didn't laugh. Everyone around us glared intensely toward the interaction, most with their phones out. I was half expecting someone to stand up for me and call out his disgusting behavior. But even the teacher started to chuckle as he lifted his phone's camera toward my direction. He got you good. Within hours, students were creeping up behind each other everywhere, during lectures, in hallways, at lunch tables. The wet sound of tongues on necks became as common as locker doors slamming. The most disturbing part wasn't the licking itself. It was how the victims reacted. They dissolve into these manic fits of laughter. Like getting licked by a stranger was the most hilarious thing that had ever happened to them. Next up was hashtag rib tickle. I sat in horror as students began jabbing pencils, pens, even sharpened wooden rulers into each other's sides during class, instead of crying out or asking for help. The victims would double over in hysterical laughter as blood pooled underneath their shirt, creating a bloom of crimson in the cloth. "You got me. You totally got me." They'd wheeze, their eyes bright with joy. The teachers never tried to stop them. I noticed most of them checking their phones more frequently, scrolling through something with a distant expression and snarled lip. Things at home got worse too. Dad had been drinking more since the move, and Danny's constant complaints about not having a phone were wearing on everyone. Last Thursday night, it all came to a head. Danny was whining again about being left out of school, about needing a phone to fit in. Dad had already downed his fourth beer for the night, and I could see his jaw getting tighter with each complaint. "What do you want a phone for, huh?" He thrust himself out of the rocking chair, suddenly exploding, his voice slurring. "So you can send pictures of your small dick to half the girls in school?" "Dad." I tried to intervene. He whipped around to face me, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Don't dad me. What about you? I bet you're just dying to post slutty little videos for all the boys on me, Mick, like your classmates, aren't you?" The room went dead silent. Dad's face turned white as he realized what he'd said. He paused for a moment, his mouth struggling to form the words his brain desperately wanted to say. After another moment, he stormed off his room without another word, leaving Danny in tears and me wondering how the hell my dad knew about me, Mick. I left for school the next day without giving my dad so much as a glance. He let out a weak "hi" as I walked down the stairs, but I didn't want to hear anything he had to say right now. I childishly held up my hand to cover the left side of my face, obscuring my peripheral view of him. I couldn't even look at him. A group of kids cornered me after last period, led by Jenny and a few others I'd seen around. They all had their phones out, with that same vacant look in their eyes that I'd been seeing for weeks. "We can't let you stay disconnected anymore," Jenny said in a voice that didn't quite sound like hers. "You need to see what you're missing." I struggled as two boys from a grade above mine grabbed my arms and pinned me against the lockers. "What are you doing?" I screamed. Jenny retorted, "It's for your own good. Do you really want to be an outcast your entire life?" My eyes scanned the hallways desperately for anyone that could help. I froze when I spotted Mr. Fredericks peeking around the corner with a vicious smile on his face. Drool dripped down the corner of his mouth, vibrating slowly, as if he was giggling uncontrollably. He was recording me with his phone. Jenny lifted her phone to my face, and I closed my eyes instinctively. The glow from the screen was ungodly bright and pierced through my eyelids. I felt their cold, rough hands grab my face, reaching for my eyelids. It took everything in my power to resist their slimy fingers as they began to pull the skin below my eyes down. Sharp fingernails began to dig into my cheeks and forehead as I screamed in agony. I couldn't resist anymore. I opened my eyes. My brain couldn't immediately process what I saw. It was both beautiful and horrific at the same time. I found myself shifting through emotions as if they were on a conveyor belt in my body. Intense pleasure, followed by seething anger, followed by guilt and loathing. Writhing shapes that hurt to look at, colors that don't exist, sounds that came through the screen and burrowed into my skull like living things, scratching their way out from the inside. I felt my consciousness starting to fray at the edges, reality unraveling into the abyss. I passed out. I woke up hours later on the bathroom floor with a bloody nose and a splitting headache. The school was eerily empty. Even for 4 p.m., my head was spinning. As I walked down the deserted hallways, I finally noticed their disheveled state. Toilet paper splattered with a dark red fluid hung from the ceilings, draped over the lockers. Most of the classroom doors now featured different strange symbols painted on the windows. They hurt to look at. I headed for the exit and tripped over a pair of jeans left on the floor. I looked down and saw multiple piles of clothes scattered throughout the school. I just wanted to go home. When I arrived, there was a wrapped box on the kitchen counter with a note in Dad's handwriting. Sorry I was so hard on you kids. I love you both. Love, Dad. I opened the box to find a brand new phone, sitting on a silk pillow. My heart sank to my stomach as I noticed an empty space next to it. There was only one phone in the box, but the note said both. I ran upstairs to Danny's room and shoved the door open. It was empty. A pile of his clothes sat on the floor with something etched into the hardwood beneath them. Symbols that made my eyes water when I tried to focus on them, drawn in what looked like blood. Danny was gone. That was 2 days ago. Dad hasn't come home since that night. I've been alone in this house, afraid to leave, afraid to stay. Sometimes I hear Danny's voice calling my name through the speaker of my new phone. Story 3. I stole my own identity, and I think my family are getting suspicious. It was late September when I had returned home. I had just come back from a summer camp that lasted 2 months. I couldn't tell you much about the camp or its counselors. I know I had a good time, except when I got lost during a group nature hike. When I finally was able to find my way back to camp, it was late and no one was in camp. When I returned home, my parents were surprised to see me. "And Max, you're home?" My mother asked. She slowly approached me and looked me up and down. She then dropped to her knees and hugged me. I could see my father standing in the doorway looking at both of us. He swiftly turned and locked himself in the den. He must have still been angry with me. Before summer camp, I had broken into his gun cabinet with some friends from school. My friend Benny accidentally pulled the trigger of one of the guns and shot a hole in the wall. No one was hurt, but my friends scattered, leaving me with a smoking gun. When my dad found out what had happened, I got the lecture of a lifetime. Do you have any idea how stupid that was? You're extremely lucky no one was hurt. He scolded. I ground you, but I'm just glad you'll be out of my sight for the next 2 months. He then kicked me out of the den and sent me to my room without dinner. A knock at my door startled me as I was looking at some magazines Benny had snuck me during class. I opened the door to see my sister, Riley, standing there with a plate of food. Mom said to sneak you a plate. She said, pushing the plate into my chest. She was taller than me, but I would assume her big, colorful hair that reeked of hairspray helped to contribute to her height. I looked her up and down, seeing her wearing her jean jacket vest with her black Sabbath shirt underneath. Her neck was weighed down by the several necklaces she frequently wore. "Are you going out?" I had asked. "No," twerp. "I just dressed this way and put on war paint before I go to La La Land." She sneered. "Do Mom and Dad know?" I asked, chewing through some broccoli. "They don't, and you better not tell them either." She whispered, "Or I'll tell Mom about your nudie mags, you little perv." She had me dead to rights. I nodded, agreeing to keep my mouth shut. Later that night, after my parents went to bed, I heard the window open from Riley's room. I went back to bed. The next morning, I came down for breakfast. Pancakes, egg, and bacon, a weekend staple for my family. My dad already sat at the table, coffee in front of him, his nose in the paper. He never said a word to anyone until his second cup of coffee. But today, he was extra silent. Must still be angry with me. Riley didn't come down for breakfast. Normal for nights, she sneaks out. "Are you excited about going to summer camp, sweetie?" My mom has asked. I nodded as I stuffed my face with bacon. "Will your friend Benny be there with us?" She asked, putting down a plate of food for my dad. No, he ended up getting summer school. I said, looking back at my mom. I could hear my father scoff from behind his paper. He never liked Benny, said he was a bad influence. It wasn't until the early afternoon when Riley finally came downstairs, still wearing her black Sabbath shirt from last night, her hair a mess, and her makeup mostly cleaned off with the slightest hint of eyeliner. She shot me a look as she grabbed a plate covered in plastic wrap from inside the microwave. She then sat down next to me on the couch and watched cartoons with me. What time are you supposed to be leaving? She asked. I think 2 p.m. I answered, not entirely sure. What is the name of the camp? She asked. Camp Manatari, I think it's called. I answered. Oh, that's it in Sleepy Falls. I remember we went there once on a family vacation. You were like 2 years old when we went. It was a weird place. She said, Weird how? I questioned. I don't know. I just remember something not right about that place. Maybe it was just because I was 7 at the time. The world seems a lot bigger and stranger when you're a kid. She laughed. You're still a kid. I quipped. Yeah. I graduate next year, and I'll likely be moving away for college. Mom will be devastated. Look out for her, okay? She said, ruffling up my brown curls at her fingers. I could smell the faint scent of cigarettes stained on her fingers. I tried cigarettes once with Benny. I felt like the inside of my throat was being punched by a fist that was on fire. It was about 2:14 p.m. when a bus pulled up to the house with Camp Manatari written on the side of it. I hugged my sister, and my mom kissed the top of my head. My dad was there to see me off, but he didn't say anything. Didn't even shake my hand like he normally would do whenever I went somewhere for a long time. IT was about a 4-hour drive until we reached the small town of Sleepy Falls. The bus weaved through the winding streets of the market district of the town. The townspeople all would come out of the shops to see the bus drive by. None of them waved or smiled. They just looked at us. When we reached the tree line for the forest, it was another 20 minutes until we reached the camp. The counselors greeted us at the bunkhouses and commanded us to gather our belongings and head to our designated bunks. The first few days at camp were mostly just a tour of the camp. It had a lake with boats and fishing, various tables for eating and crafts, an archery area, a go-kart track, and a garden. There was a hiking trail that would lead deeper into the forest. By the 4th night, the counselor sat us by a fire to share ghost stories. Ms. Keene, could you tell us about how the camp got its name? One kid asked. The young counselor, known as Ms. Keene, was only a few years older than my own sister, with straight red hair that was pulled back into a ponytail. Of course. So the town of Sleepy Falls was founded by European settlers in the 15th century. There was a local legend about a forest guardian known as the Manatari that would stalk the forest and abduct those who wandered into the woods. No one knows if this legend was brought over by the European settlers or if it was a story created by the local tribes. Some say it's some sort of fae. Others say it's a spirit. She explained. I raised my hand to gain an answer to the question that began to swell my brain. Yes, Max was it, she said, pointing at me. Why would they name the camp after a monster that abducts people? I asked. I believe it was in honor of the creature's benevolent behavior as a protector of the forest. She answered. Now, how would you all like to hear the story of the horseman from hell? She asked. The kids cheered, ready for the next scary story. I didn't pay much attention to the rest of the night. When we all turned in for bed, I just thought about how much I already missed home. My mom, Riley, even my dad. The next couple of months were just regularly scheduled events. A couple of weeks before the end of camp, Ms. Keene became sick. She stayed in her bunkhouse most days, only occasionally being seen from her window, watching us play. Eventually we stopped seeing her. I asked another counselor what had happened to her. Oh, Ms. Keene? We had to send her to the hospital. She was really sick and not getting any better. He answered, will she be back before the end of camp? I asked, and no, and maybe next year. He answered, hey, no more questions. Let's get ready for one of our last nature hikes. He said, the hike was like all the others. Same trail, same trees, same plants. During the hike, I started to lag behind a bit, daydreaming about what happened to Miss Keene, and thinking about how by the end of the week, I'll be back home. I hope my dad isn't still mad at me. Max. A voice reached out from behind a tree. I stopped in my tracks, looking around, but I didn't see anyone. Max. The voice said again. I recognized that voice, even though I hadn't heard it in 3 weeks. It was Ms. Keene. Ms. Keene? Is that you? I asked, P, please help me. Why you don't have to do this? Ms. Keene said, P, please follow me, children. She called to me, Guys! Hey, I found Ms. Keene. I think she's hurt. I yelled to the group ahead of me. But they didn't hear me. I decided to follow the voice to find Ms. Keene. If she was hurt, I could help her using the first aid skills I learned from one of the camp events. I followed the voice further into the forest, farther away from the trail. Before I knew it, I got turned around. I was lost. I never found Ms. Keene. I decided to backtrack the best I could back to the camp. Somehow, someway I made it back. I was still being embraced by my mother. She was crying on my shoulder. I could feel her hot breath from her wails against me, her tears slowly dripping into my shirt. From the den, I heard a loud pop sound. It was a similar sound to when Benny accidentally shot the gun in there months ago, just more muffled. I could hear rumbling coming from the stairs as Riley came running down then. What the fuck happened? She cried. She came and stopped in the doorway as soon as she saw me. All right, Riley? I said as I pulled myself away from my mother's grasp. She collapsed to her hands and knees as she cried even harder into the tile. What the fuck? She screamed as she turned around and ran back upstairs and slammed her bedroom door. I walked over the phone on the wall and picked it up and listened. I could hear Riley's ragged breath, her trying to hold back tears. 911, what is your emergency? A voice asked, Hello? Please send help. I'm at 3232 West Holly Lane, she said desperately. What is happening there? The operator asked. It's my brother. He's downstairs with my mother. I think my father shot himself. She cried. Your father shot himself. Okay, we'll send a cruiser and an ambulance your way. The operator said, No, that's not it. My brother disappeared a month ago at summer camp. They found his body in the woods. We buried him last week. That thing downstairs is not my brother. She screamed, her voice finally breaking down in cries of both sadness and fear. Story 4. The Nursery Rhyme of Lily Grace. I met a girl named Lily Grace. She wore a bow and had a lace. We played with dolls and tea for two, and painted skies a perfect blue. She came each day when school was done. We'd chase the clouds and race the sun. She knew the songs I loved to sing and danced around in fairy rings. She whispered jokes that made me laugh, drew silly faces on my graph. She told me secrets none could hear. My special friend who's always near. I met a girl named Lily Grace. She wore a bow and had a lace. We played with dolls and tea for two, and painted skies a perfect blue. She came each day when school was done. We'd chase the clouds and race the sun. She told me I should skip my chores and lock the bedroom closet doors. She whispered jokes that made me laugh, drew silly faces on my graph. She told me secrets none could hear. My special friend who's always near. I met a girl named Lily Grace. She wore a bow and had a lace. We played with dolls and tea for two, and painted skies a perfect blue. She came each day when school was done. We'd chase the clouds and race the sun. She told me not to talk at school. They'll only laugh. They're mean and cruel. She whispered jokes that made me laugh, drew silly faces on my graph. She told me secrets none could hear. My special friend who's always near. I met a girl named Lily Grace. Her bow was tight. It hugged her face. We played with dolls and tea for two. She painted skies a deeper blue. She came each day when school was done. Don't play with them. You've only one. She said that friends like me are rare, and locked the closet with my spare. She whispered jokes that made me laugh, drew funny shapes across my graph. She told me who to love and fear, my special friend who's always near. I met a girl named Lily Grace. Her bow was tight, it hugged her face. We played with dolls that wouldn't blink. She taught me how the grown-ups think. She came each day when school was done. She told me, tell them you have none. Don't say I'm here, they'd take me back. She scribbled warnings in my snack. She whispered jokes that made me choke and laughed until the pencil broke. She told me where to sleep and when. My only friend, I met a girl named Lily Grace. Her bow was frayed across her face. We played with dolls who lost their heads. She said they spoke to her in threads. She came each day when school was done. She whispered, scissors can be fun. It's not to hurt, it's just to see you'll look more real, more just like me. She told me jokes I didn't get. Her laughter made my t-shirt wet. She sat too close and pulled my ear, my special friend who's always near. I met a girl named Lily Grace. Her bow was knotted out of place. She traced her name on every wall and watched me from the shower stall. She came each day when lights grew dim. She said, don't talk about him. If Daddy yells, just hold your breath. Pretend he's gone. Pretend it's death. Her voice grew sharp behind my back. Her jokes all made my vision black. She said she'd bite if I showed fear. My shadow friend who's always near. I met a girl named Lily Grace who scratched her name into my face. She pulled the heads off every bear and braided knots into my hair. She came when Mama closed the door. Push her down and say no more. They lie to you. They steal your dreams. The only truth is in the screams. Her songs don't rhyme. Her eyes don't blink. Her laugh now smells like gasoline. I cried, but she just grinned and leered. My hungry friend who's always near. I met a girl named Lily Grace. She tore the lace and took my place. We played a game with knives and glue. She drew a third eye on my shoe. She knocked when I forgot her name and whispered rules I couldn't change. Don't look outside. Don't blink. Don't eat. Just lie real still and hide your feet. I tried to breathe but heard her hiss. You told the nurse, you'll pay for this. I bled and Lily pulled me near, my sleepless friend who's always here. I met a girl named Lily Grace who carved a smile into her face. She spoke in voices not her own and said the stars were watching home. She scratched the walls with sharpened bone. She cried in tongues when left alone. You're broken now. You let them know. You'll drown when midnight starts to glow. I saw her mouth beneath my skin. She said we'd start again within. She sleeps beneath my throat and ear, my screaming friend who's always near. I met a girl named Lily, maybe? She sings when quiet gets too heavy. She folded spiders in my shoe. I think she dreams inside me too. I told the nurse. I said, she bites. They gave me pills and turned the lights. I tried to scream, but I forgot the name, the date, the burning spot. She's standing now. I feel her breath. She wrote her name across my chest. If someone's reading this, please hear. I think she's real. I think she's near. Bow-faced Lily mirror skin. She peeks through when I let her in. We are the game. We are the floor. She locks the mouth and paints the door. Don't take her. Don't make her mad. The ceiling cries when I am bad. Her hands are mine. My eyes are red. She says I'm better when I'm dead. I did the thing. I made it right. I tore the room. I killed the light. Please tell her I'm good. Tell her I'm clean. She's in me now. She's in between. Grace, Grace, Grace. Lily's face. Chalk inside the fireplace. Mirror glass. Inside the phone. Voice on voice on voice alone. The teeth in suit. The bell that cries. My fingers peel. She wears the eyes. Mom was wrong. Her skin was fake. She shouldn't scream. She made the lake. LOL Lily scratched me clean. Stuck inside the tangerine. My tongue is dust. My blood is clear. She's near, she's near, she's near, she's near. Shut your mouth. Close your head. You let them look. You should be dead. Don't eat. Don't think. Don't move the bed. The skin will peel. It peels. It peels. Obey. Repeat. Forget your name. Rip the picture. Burn the game. Sleep with scissors. Count in threes. She's in your lungs. She's in your knees. I am. I am the glass. I am the thing that does not pass. I am the rhyme that ends a rhyme. You are not yours. Not anymore. She said I'm better when I'm dead. 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 Story 5. I think the world ended. Can someone please confirm? I hope someone is reading this. It is my strong suspicion that humanity ended about a week ago. If that is the case, I am posting this in hopes that I am not the last survivor. Please send help. I have no idea how much longer I'll hold out. I should mention that I was born without my sight. It's been a challenge for me. The world we've built is one dominated by the ability to see. Education, roads, even most forms of entertainment are predominantly experienced through the eyes. People have often asked me what it's like to be blind, but that's difficult for me to describe. It's just how I am. I like to think that it has allowed me to experience the world in a way that few others do. I can appreciate my other senses to a degree that makes life just as beautiful for me as for anyone else, or as terrifying. Believe it or not, I work as an author. My setup allows me to use speech to text and even reads my work back to me so I can correct it. I truly enjoy writing. It lets me paint pictures that I can experience the beauty of. That being said, it is a very lonely life. I don't really have too many friends, save the cleaning lady who gives my apartment a one-over every month. It's to my shame that I admit I've gone for months without leaving my apartment before. I didn't really see any need for me to. I get all the fresh air I need when I drink my coffee on the balcony, and it's not like natural beauty does anything for me, but I do so love the sounds. The birds singing, the wind blowing through leaves, even the sound of traffic. It makes me appreciate that life is happening all around me. I often felt like the hunchback of Notre Dame, stuck in my tower while the world goes on below me, only I chose my prison. As a result, I've given myself an unofficial mandate that I must go outside at least once every day for a short walk. I think it keeps me not just sane, but also it helps me be happier. Another way I avoid depression is a routine. Even if it is a loose one, I find it helps keep my life structured. I wake up at 7 a.m. and eat breakfast on my balcony. It's one of my favorite parts of the day. I soak in the world around me, the wind brushing over my skin, the birds chirping back and forth to each other in their busy escapades, the smell of the bakery from the street below. It's when I feel most alive. After that, I shower, get dressed, and begin work at 8:30. I spend the rest of my morning wrestling with writer's block or brainstorming for my next chapters, and then take a break around noon to have a small lunch and go on that walk I mentioned earlier. Then, it's back to writing at 1:30. I usually continue on until around 5, which is when I make myself dinner. After dinner, I unwind by listening to audiobooks or podcasts. That, or sometimes I'll put a movie on. As you may have gathered, I experience this world differently than most. For example, I can't just look at the sky and see a storm. I feel when the clouds are ready to pour down rain on the earth. I smell the weight of it in the air, and I hear the subtle change in the wind's voice, the way it hushes like the sky is holding its breath. I've always lived my life this way, and I wouldn't change it. But recently something has been off. I noticed it 13 days ago when I was eating my breakfast. It was a sunny day, and the wind blew gently through my hair. But the smell of it was odd. It had a hint of almost a medical smell, like formaldehyde. I didn't have time to dwell on it before a melody of chirps sprung out closer to me than usual. A robin was singing its flute-like song for me. I smiled. It was truly a special way to start my day. My walk that day was also a bit odd, only in the sense that cars seemed more aggressive than normal. The sound of engines revving and horns beeping seemed more common. I could hear people talking too. Someone walked by me, asking their partner about dinner on the phone. Another pair was standing not far away, talking about the weather. Yet another was discussing some meeting they had at work. All perfectly mundane and normal things. What bothered me at this point was the smell. It was not the usual smell of the lake and the trees. Everything was tainted with a chemical smell, and something else, something masked by it, like if you were to microwave raw chicken until it was just hot enough to produce an aroma. I showered after I got home, trying to scrub the stench off of me, but I didn't let it bother me. The rest of my day went as it normally does, as did my morning the next day. I woke up and prepared my breakfast, dusting off the chair on the balcony. The wind was just a bit rougher today, yet dry. It was not unpleasant enough for me to go inside. I couldn't smell the bakery that morning, but I was able to enjoy the sounds I usually do. Cars rushed by, people chatted below, and the robin even sang a song for me again. I worked, I ate, I went for a walk, but I almost considered cutting it short. The smell was getting worse. Its mask was slipping off. I could make out the faint scent of burnt hair now too. Up until now, I was not particularly bothered. The following is what sent me into my steep slide into paranoia. The conversations I heard. Someone asked their partner about dinner. Someone was discussing the weather. Someone was complaining about a meeting. The same voices, the same tones, the same cadences. I stopped to listen, but the conversations all sounded normal to me. A car jolted me back to my senses. 3 quick beeps from the road ahead. I smirked to myself. Everyone was always in such a hurry. I talked myself down on the way home. These were all normal conversations, very common, and not unreasonable that people discussed them. After all, I didn't memorize anyone's voice. Who's to say it was the same people? And yet the next day, the robin with the same tune, dinner, weather, work, 3 beeps. The next day, the day after, and the day after. I even changed my routine. I ate dinner inside, but I could still hear the bird clear as day from my window. I walked another path, yet I heard the same voices, the same mundane conversations. 5 days ago, I tried something else. I left the house at 4 a.m. before dawn. No breakfast, no routine, just a coat, my cane, and silence. I walked through streets I hadn't stepped on in years, quiet side roads, fenced-off alleys, industrial zones. And still I heard it, the robin singing, not distant, close. "What's for dinner?" a woman asked, passing behind me. Calm, casual. "This fog is terrible," a man replied on my right. "Supposed to clear by noon." Yet another, "My boss is writing me about that meeting again." The voices never overlapped. Each one waited their turn like actors in scene. The pauses between them, identical every time. Then 3 honks just ahead of me. I ran home and locked my doors and windows. But it didn't change anything. I still hear the robin every day like clockwork. I can even hear the 3 honks on the street below when their time comes. I haven't left my apartment yet. But yesterday, I was fumbling around the living room and knocked something off the shelf. My old radio. It hasn't worked in years. It fell, cracked, and let out a brief burst of static. Then the robin stopped singing. The traffic fell silent. The busy chattering from pedestrians vanished without a trace. And in their place, new noises. Wind, not gentle, but howling, pushing and scraping against the building like claws. Distant crackling, like fire chewing through dry wood, or the brittle remains of something once alive. And beneath it all, a deep rumble. Not mechanical, geological. The city groaned, not with life, but with pressure, as if its bones were shifting under the weight of their own collapse. I heard something metal fall, far off, a sign or a street lamp. Maybe it struck the ground and didn't stop ringing. There were no footsteps, no laughter, no voices, only the wind and the ruins left for it to gnaw on. It lasted only seconds, but it was enough for me to take it all in. The picture of these sounds painted sick in me my core. Then, like a machine sputtering back to life, the robin returned. Then the cars and the conversations, drowning out the sounds of emptiness in a deafening juxtaposition. All of it came back, just like before. Perfect, polished, rehearsed. But what they couldn't keep from me is the smell. Warm, rancid flesh and sour. Acidic chemicals hidden behind the smell of pastries and fresh bread. Now I sit here on the balcony, coffee in hand, pretending the world is still alive. The robin sings on cue. The conversations start in order. The smells drift up from a bakery I'm sure no longer stands. But I know now, whatever's out there wants me to believe, to follow my routine. And most days I do, because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't. Story 6. Something that looks exactly like me shows up on my birthday every year and gives me a wish. This year I wished for something horrible. Have you ever wondered what you look like from other people's perspective? Well, I have, and on my 18th birthday, an unassuming knock on my college dorm door satisfied my curiosity. And then some. My young naivete caused the assumption it was one of my roommates, or perhaps the RA, and so I opened the door without so much as an inquisitive "who's there?" The knocker's identity brought out a dormant instinct harbored deep within me that I would wish on nobody. It was me? Something that looked identical to me stood on the crude, jokey pink doormat in front of our dorm, wearing a wide, knowing smile and holding a tiny slice of candle-top cake. It clearly noticed my sudden inability to form any words because it spoke, in my exact voice and cadence, to break the silence. Happy birthday. I'm glad we can finally meet in the flesh. Unfortunately, you have no birthday wishes saved, but there's always time for a first. So make those gears in your head turn, and think of something. An unseeable spark lit the candle as the final sound came out of his mouth, whilst my mind, as requested, did work except not to think of a wish. I slammed the door shut as it went to speak again out of nothing but horrifying instinct and spent the next few hours shell-shocked. Beyond the general impossibility of what I had seen, of what talked to me, I kept going back to the cherry on top of the disturbing pie. There were no imperfections, no skin blemishes where there shouldn't have been any, no teeth ever so slightly mispositioned, no strands of hair out of place. Nothing at all that might have tipped myself, or anybody else off to the fact that it was an imposter. I still refuse to refer to it by any word suggesting any level of humanity. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of bewildered depression and terror. The few times I ventured out of my dorm room, I was greeted by that same slice of cake, rotten, withering and swarmed by flies, but there and still lit nonetheless. The few times I talked to my dorm mates about it, they said nothing was there. No cake, no candle. On the outside, I was talking about a doppelganger and a piece of birthday cake they couldn't see. So they grew increasingly concerned with me as the weeks went on, not wanting to be sent to some facility. I gathered the courage to begin ignoring it all. I stepped over the cake, which burned with a slightly weaker flame every morning and evening, and pushed the imposter out of my mind's sight. Things slowly improved, and I began to turn a blind eye to the situation when my 19th birthday rolled around quicker than I had thought it would. And like it never left, that thing tapped on the front door again. I considered not opening. In fact, I was convinced that not opening was the only logical decision. But as I stared into my very own eyes through the peephole and saw the ominously full of possibilities flicker of the candle reflect into them, I twisted the handle and opened right up. Glad you decided it was worth it. First year is always so difficult. It spoke in a soft tone before continuing. Like I was saying before I was so rudely cut off, happy birthday again. I'm pleased to be delivering your second wish. I hope you use it while giving away your first was spent. Wasting a wish is not something I'm able to tolerate. But you get a pass since I never got the chance to explain it all. Wish for anything that affects you and only you directly. Your use of whatever you wish for may affect other people, but your wish itself cannot. The lines are blurry when you're just getting started, so just look for the flame to disappear when you blow on it. Please note that your wish will be delivered exactly as described, but you are not able to influence the source of fulfillment. Enjoy. It then placed a slice of cake identical to the year prior on the doormat and walked away. Is that what I walk like? I really haven't changed that, was the first thought in my mind. A nice ray of humorous sunshine amidst whatever the hell this was. That year I wished for money. Not quite fuck you money, but enough to leave me comfortable. Except it was money stolen from the proceeds of a charity fundraiser. I'd spent a lot of the time between my wish being fulfilled and the eventual knock at the door of my newly bought downtown apartment one evening. And even after all that's happened, I still feel waves of guilt rush over me because of this. Despite my protestations of ignorance and innocence, I was handcuffed and following a short trial handed a sentence of 10 years in a damp, bare-walled cell. Many nights were spent ruminating over what I had asked for, what I had unwittingly done, and what I wanted to do to the thing that made it all happen. But despite my continued pleas of innocence throughout the year, there was just no rational explanation for hundreds of thousands of dollars of stolen cash ending up wired into my bank account. I simply played the game and I lost. End of story. Except when it came to visit me that same year, and we locked eyes between the metal bars that chained me. I had forgotten that not playing was an option. I didn't speak a word. Just stared and wondered whether my cell neighbors or the guards had the ability to witness the sight before me as it recited a new monologue. I didn't even care for the ridiculously terrifying fact that all of this was real, at least to me. The cake subsequently spent a few days sitting on the cold concrete floor of my cell, the flame burning into and out of existence as I glanced at it and then away before the whispering started. It sounded like a cacophonic buzz of young and old voices all willing me into making my wish, into taking what was mine. They told me that I just had to be smarter, that now I knew there was a game to be played, to be won. I stood firm with my disinterest for quite some weeks, until I was called to the inmate telephone to be given the news that my mother had been murdered. She was found inside an industrial dough mixer. They still hadn't recovered the mangled pieces of her trapped inside that metal grave when I got the call. Swinging wildly between states of unadulterated rage and grief, I stumbled my way back to my cell. I had an idea. The fainter than kindled light, the candle flame, danced in the shadows as if to taunt me, as if to say on behalf of something unexplainably real, "Look what you made me do." Crouching and lips pursed until I was low enough for the air to whistle out of my mouth and onto the flame, I finally gave in to the temptations of the whispers. I wished for my doppelganger to die a slow and painful death. And at that moment, as soon as the flame bent and promptly went back to the nothingness from whence it came, my suffering began. Even though I was granted a commutation of my sentence on compassionate grounds, I still find myself trapped. My skin is gradually sloughing away, my arms and legs losing more function with each passing day, my mind slowly shutting down. I can barely type without frequent breaks. They have run every test, called in every expert with even a passing interest in my condition, but the doctors still can't explain it. I can. Story 7. I'm a rideshare driver. This was my strangest passenger. I'm going to be honest, driving for a rideshare company was not my dream job. But money is money, and it's better not to turn your nose up at an opportunity. Really, I was just happy to be making any money at all. A few years ago, my life was a mess, and pulling myself out of said mess has not been an easy feat, but I have been doing it. I'm on the straight and narrow these days. I'm turning it all around, step by step, and driving for the company, which shall not be named, is part of that. It's not like the work is bad either. Driving is fun for me. I find it relaxing, so the days go by fast. And some of the folks you meet while driving are pretty neat. There's something about meeting people from all walks of life and sharing a brief connection with them during the course of a short ride. It's hard to describe it exactly. I guess the closest I could come is calling it a positive ennui. Maybe the word is contentment? Maybe. I don't know if I call myself content with where I am in life, but I'm not exactly miserable either. Like I said, it's hard to describe, and do I speak for everyone? Absolutely fucking not. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there who are going to tear me a new asshole for having the company's cock jammed so far down my throat that it's a wonder I can still breathe. And to be completely honest, I wouldn't be doing this fucking job if I had any other options. But when forced into a situation out of desperation, one tries to make the best of it because the alternative is extremely fucking miserable. I hadn't really been able to sleep the night that I picked up Hillary, and I'd figured that since I couldn't sleep, I might as well try to make some money. It was around midnight on a Friday, so I figured I could pick up the late night bar crowd. I'd done it before, and even had a few regulars I saw every so often. As expected, my first few rides at night were from the standard bar crowd. Drunk college kids heading back to their dorms. A few old barflies going home to their wives, and a couple of randos who didn't fit either description. All in all, it was a pretty average night, up until I got the request from Hillary. It came in at around 1:45 a.m. At a glance, there didn't seem to be anything off about it. She was near an intersection about 15 minutes away from me, between the hospital and one of the rowdier college bars. I didn't think anything of it as I accepted the request and made my way over. The street was dead silent. There were a few parked cars, but everything was closed and there wasn't a single sign of life anywhere, save for the bar down the street. Still, I pulled over the spot where the app told me to pull over and waited. I messaged Hillary to let her know that I was there, before looking around to see if she was on her way. No sign of her. No sign of anyone. The street was abandoned, which was kind of weird. I would have expected to at least see some people on the sidewalks, heading out for the evening. Then, all of a sudden my rear passenger door opened. I looked back just in time to see a shabby-looking blonde woman getting in. She looked a little older than the regular bar crowd, and if I had to guess, I'd say that she was somewhere in her mid to late 30s. She shuffled into my back seat without a word before closing the door. I remember noticing just how stiff her movements were. Her arms were limp and seemed to hang off of her body. She moved almost like she was being dragged or thrown, and at the time I just assumed she was drunk. "Evening," I said, although she didn't reply. I glanced down at my phone. Her destination was an address on the east side of the town, in the suburbs. I confirmed it with her, and she just sort of gave this quiet half nod. Good enough. With that, I pulled back out onto the street. I glanced at her in my rear view mirror. She stared silently out the window, watching the quiet buildings pass by. I got the impression that she didn't really want to talk, but the air in the car felt awkward. I had to shake that off. Somehow, late night tonight, huh? I asked. Her head shifted slightly as she looked at me. "You hitting up the bars?" I asked. "No," came a reply. Her voice was flat and relatively toneless. Maybe she wasn't much of a drinker? I mean, despite the way she moved, she didn't exactly look drunk. But then why was she out this late? It technically wasn't any of my business, but I was still curious. I mean, technically, I don't really like getting involved in other people's drama. It's just exhausting, and who's got the energy for it? There's 1,000 more productive things that you could be doing. Why waste your time getting involved in other people's business? But I was also a nosy little fucker. I suppose that's why drama always happened to find me. But I digress. I pushed her a little further. "Working?" I asked. No response. But looking at her in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw her head shake slightly, and that's when I noticed the plastic wristband she was wearing. The kind of wristband you only get at the hospital. Oh shit. Now if I was a smart man, I'd have shut my mouth. But I didn't end up with no other employment options aside from rideshare apps by being a smart man, did I? Hospital stay, huh? Hope everything's alright. Her eyes shifted toward me, but she still didn't say a word. For a moment, I wondered if I might have just touched some kind of nerve, and then she spoke again. "My husband is waiting for me," she said, her voice still as toneless as before. I quietly wondered why he couldn't pick her up himself. Still, I try to pry even further because I'm physically incapable of taking a hint. Guess he's not driver, huh? I asked. No answer. How long have you been married? No answer. I kept talking, but she didn't talk back, and after a while I finally had no choice but to shut up. We drove into the suburbs, through a rougher part of town. The address she'd given me led to an old house that had probably seen some better days, and I pulled to a stop in front of it. The lights were off, but I could see a pickup truck out front, telling me that somebody was home. Alrighty, finally home. I said, still trying to make some form of conversation. But when I looked back, my passenger was gone. I hadn't even heard the door open. She was just gone. I paused, scanning my back seat, and even checking the floor, just in case she'd randomly decided to get down there for some stupid reason. Nothing. It was like she'd never even been there. I checked my phone. According to it, I was offline. There was no ride request from anyone named Hillary. What the fuck? My mind immediately drifted back to some stories I'd read about taxis picking up ghosts. Apparently, it was such a problem in New Orleans that the taxi stopped picking people up past a certain hour. Had that been what had happened here? Holy shit! Had I just encountered an honest-to-God ghost? That was so cool. And then the screaming started. It was faint, distant even. Definitely coming from the house I just dropped my ghost off at. I looked over at the house. The lights were still dark, and I caught myself wondering if I was imagining the screaming, since someone inside the house would need to be screaming pretty loud in order for me to hear them. And that's when I heard the gunshot. Hell, I saw the gunshot. I saw the flash of light in the window as someone in that house started shooting. And immediately, I realized that something very fucking horrible was going on. Immediately, I got up and raced toward the door. Was that a smart move? No, probably not. The smart move would have been to call 911. But I didn't get where I am in life by being a smart person, did I? So I sprinted for the front door of the house. It was unlocked. I don't really know what I was thinking of doing. I didn't really have any sort of plan. I've never been much of a planner. The moment I made it through that door, something dropped off the second floor in front of me, hitting the hardwood floor before me with a heavy thud. It took me a moment to realize that it was a person, a man, somewhere in his 30s or 40s. He gasped in pain and writhed on the ground. I noticed a gun on the ground beside him. It was out of his reach, but it was just beside my shoe. I could have kicked it over to him. Instead, I watched him drag himself toward it before my eyes shifted up toward a shape on the stairs. It was Hillary. She stared at me, eyes burning into mine. She was daring me to move. I took a step back. Whatever the hell this was, my gut told me that getting involved was a bad idea. Hillary continued to stare at me. The man on the ground reached for the gun. I kicked it away. I don't know why I bothered. I don't think the gun would have helped him. Looking back at it, I don't think there was anything that could have helped him. Still, his hand froze. He looked up at me, noticing me for the first time. We stared at each other. Neither of us said a word. Something grabbed him. It wasn't her. It was just, well, it was nothing. One moment, he was laying there in front of me, and the next, something was dragging him, screaming into the darkened house. I took a step back, and I booked it back to the car. By that point, I'd seen enough to decide that it was better just not to get involved. Does that make me a coward? Maybe. Do I give a fuck? No. I heard about an incident on the local news a day later. It was a real tragedy. They said a local man had apparently taken his own life after his wife had passed away in the hospital. It wasn't a grief thing either. Apparently the police had been investigating him for allegations of battery. Crazy. I never went to the police. Obviously. Even if I did, I don't think they'd believe me anyway. Hell, I doubt you'll believe me. But what the hell? I gotta tell someone, right? Story 8. I got a job cleaning out a storage unit. I found my childhood bedroom inside. I work part-time for a junk removal company. It's mostly boring. Old couches, broken TVs, the occasional moldy fridge. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. Last week, my boss got a contract with one of those large storage unit places. You know the ones, rows and rows of identical roll-up doors, tucked away behind chain link and security cameras. One tenant had defaulted on rent for over a decade. The family was unreachable. Legal stuff had all cleared. Our job was to clean it out. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe some boxes, a mattress, maybe a dead rat or two. But the moment I rolled up the door, I froze. It was my bedroom. I don't mean it looked like my bedroom. I mean it was my bedroom, down to the faded Power Rangers poster on the wall. The Spider-Man bedsheets with the corner that I chewed on as a kid. The small bookshelf with Goosebumps stacked in order of how scary I thought they were. Even the scratch I accidentally carved into the nightstand when I dropped a steak knife at age 7. It was there. I didn't know what to say. Someone really wanted to recreate the 90s. My co-worker joked. I didn't respond. Because here's the thing. My family moved houses when I was 9. We sold or donated everything. We didn't keep any of it. And this exact room had burned down in an electrical fire in 2007. Nothing was left. I remember the way it smelled. I remember watching my bed frame melt. I called my mom that night. Hey, this is going to sound really weird, but do you remember that old Spider-Man bedspread I used to have? She hesitated. Of course. Why? You're sure we didn't keep anything from that room? Nothing in storage. No, honey, we lost all that in the fire. You know that. Right? She paused. Why are you asking? I lied and said I saw a similar one in a thrift store. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how exact it was. Like someone had taken a 3D scan of the room and preserved it. Even the drawers were organized the way I used to keep them. I went back the next day. Technically, I wasn't supposed to be there. It was supposed to be cleared and dumped already. But I still had the keys. When I opened the door, the scent hit me. Not mold, not dust. It smelled like home. Like popcorn and baby shampoo, and the Febreze my mom used to spray after vacuuming. I stepped in and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped just the way I remembered, and then I saw something new. On the desk, which had been empty yesterday, there was a drawing, folded in half, like the kind I used to make and hide in books. I opened it. It was a child's crayon sketch, me, in my old pajamas, standing next to a tall figure in all black, no face, just a smile drawn too wide. My hand was in his. The words above said, I never left. I ran. I locked the door and threw the keys into the sewer drain on my way home. That night, I dreamed of my childhood bedroom. But it wasn't the fire like I usually dream. It was the storage unit. Same bed, same sheets, same poster. And in the corner, crouched in the dark, something was watching me. I haven't gone back. I haven't told my boss. But yesterday, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. It was a picture of me, sleeping, in my old bed, in the unit, and scrawled on the back, in childish handwriting, were 3 words. You came back. Story 9. I booked an escort not from our reality. It started like any other day. I work a typical 9 to 5 in a gray-walled office wedged between a refinery and a cold storage depot. It was nothing glamorous, just payroll, inventory, and data entry. The warehouse out back hums with forklifts and pallets and smells like oil, steel, and stale coffee. It's industrial purgatory. My job is to make sure the numbers line up and nobody's skimming off the top. I usually clock out around dusk, when the sodium lights flicker on and the sky turns bruised and yellow. That night, I lingered a little longer, triple-checking a shipment invoice that didn't sit right. A truckload of supplies had gone unlogged. No signature, no weight data, no product line. Just a blank space where there should have been something. Or someone. From my second-floor office window, I had a clear view of the backloading dock. That's when I saw the truck. A large, white freight hauler, unmarked. The kind that smells like bleach and cold sweat. Backed in the far bay with its lights off. It rolled in slow, deliberate, like it didn't want to be seen. A man in a reflective vest emerged from the cab, then opened the rear doors, and then they stepped out one by one. For women, at first glance, they looked like human girls, but they had unusual features. I couldn't quite make them out as they each wore oversized coats they pulled tight around their bodies, as if they were trying to disappear into the fabric. Their eyes were wide, searching the shadows, like prey searching for their predators. One stumbled slightly as she hit the concrete, catching herself with trembling fingers. I should have called someone, but something stopped me. Something about their faces. They were beautiful, almost too beautiful. The kind of beauty that feels more designed than born. I squinted against the glass, trying to parse what I was seeing. For example, one woman's skin had a faint reddish hue, not from blush or windburn, but something deeper. She had undertones that shimmered when the light caught her cheek just right. Small, curling horns poked to the top of her head, as her dark black hair was cropped short just below her neck. They looked too connected to her forehead to be prosthetic. I told myself they were costumes. Makeup, some kind of elaborate viral stunt. A haunted house promo maybe, or one of those weird immersive theater things rich people pay thousands for. But what kind of show leaves its actors looking like they're terrified out of their minds? What kind of role demands fear that raw? One of the girls looked right at me. I caught the longing in her eyes, the fear and the desperation. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't playing a part. None of them were. A few men emerged from the yawning darkness of the warehouse. Their movements were slow, casual, like this was routine. No shouting, no barking of orders. Just calm, practiced movements. They didn't have uniforms, but they wore dark jackets and work gloves. One of them held a clipboard, as if this was just another delivery to log. The girls hesitated at the edge of the truck's shadow, but a sharp gesture from one of the men sent them filing inside in a single, obedient line. No protest, no resistance, just a slow, hollow shuffle of sandal feet on concrete as they filed one by one single file into the warehouse. Something about their silence made the hair rise on my arms. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and left the building. My heart jackhammered in my chest as I went to the back of the building, out of sight, where my vehicle was parked. I slid into my car and pulled away from my usual spot, circling around the far end of the lot, just past a rusted chain-link fence, where many unused vehicles remained in an unpaved lot. I tucked in beside a few of them, out of view, and killed the engine. From there, I had a clear line of sight to the warehouse's open bay. The men were stripping the girls. They peeled away the oversized coats like they were shedding packaging. The garments hit the floor in limp piles, revealing the girls' barely clothed bodies. Just jean shorts and bikini tops were covering them. The warehouse lights glared down on their skin, sterile and unflinching. Each girl stood stiff as a statue, eyes shut tight, arms locked at their sides like it might protect them, or maybe because they'd been told not to move. Their bodies trembled slightly in the chill, but they didn't make a sound. And then I saw them, really saw them. The green-skinned girl was the first to break my sense of disbelief. Her hair was writhing, coiling. At first, I thought it was some kind of clever prop, but my blood chilled when I now got a better look. Each strand of her hair was alive, wriggling independently like it had its own mind. Snakes. Her hair was made of snakes. They hissed and coiled, agitated, though she stood perfectly still. Her skin wasn't painted. It was smooth, lime-colored, patterned faintly with scales that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. Her pupils were vertical slits, and I swear, when she opened her eyes for a flicker of a second, she looked directly at me. The red-skinned girl beside her was slightly taller, her horns curling back over her head like ram's horns, polished and dark. Her skin was a muted crimson, not fire truck red, but more like old blood. There was something subtly wrong with the air around her, like heat shimmered off her body even though it was cold. Her expression was blank distant, but her lips parted slightly, showing two elongated canines. She had to be a succubus. The aquatic girl, blue as sea glass, stood next to her. Her skin had a faint iridescence, and her collarbones bore subtle ridges where her gills fluttered, as if testing the air. Her eyes were wide and silver-flecked, and her feet, fully webbed, shifted on the concrete, like she didn't know how to stand upright for long. She had long, elaborate dark blue hair that cascaded down her back. She looked newer, less hardened. Her arms were mostly human, but around her elbows the scales thickened, hinting at something underneath that didn't belong on land. She looked a lot like a mermaid, only with legs. And then there was the third woman, the fairy. God, she looked fragile. And she was so small. She had to be no taller than 5 feet. The kind of thin that suggested she hadn't eaten in weeks. Her skin was a cold shade of ivory with almost runic veins etched all over her body in elaborate patterns. Her mouth was clamped shut, but when she turned slightly, I caught a glimpse of her wings. They were long, slender, not the cartoonish kind, but real, elaborate, and elegant. Her normally happy expression was absent, replaced by a cold, gaunt look. One of the men walked up behind them and began fastening black zip ties around their wrists. Tight, unforgiving, he moved mechanically, as though binding exotic animals for transport. He looped their ankles with chains, thin enough to walk in, thick enough to control. The girls flinched at the contact, but said nothing. The succubus winced as the plastic bit into her wrists. The mermaid's eyes welled slightly, but the tears didn't fall. Then the man did something that made my blood run cold. He slapped the Gorgon across the ass, hard. The sound echoed through the empty lot like a gunshot. She didn't react. She didn't cry out or turn her head. But I saw the snakes recoil violently, hissing, writhing with fury she couldn't show. The men herded them deeper into the warehouse like livestock. I just sat there, trying to process what the fuck I was seeing. Because in that moment, one horrifying thought lodged deep in my skull. These girls weren't just being trafficked. They weren't even human. My fingers were frozen on the steering wheel, heart pounding so hard it made my vision pulse. My brain was screaming at me to call someone. Anyone. But who the hell would believe me? Hey, officer! I just watched 4 mythological monster girls get taken into a warehouse at the center of the city. Yeah, because 911 wouldn't tell me not to tie up the line. As they were led further inside, the light grew dimmer. The warehouse swallowed them, but not entirely. A single floodlight buzzed overhead, casting a broad yellow cone over a low, makeshift couch position just beyond the bay entrance, cobbled together from old cushions and tarp-covered padding. It looked like something torn from a brothel or holding cell. Stained, improvised, used. The girls were sat there in a silent row, facing the lot, facing me. I sank lower in my seat, heart pounding again from the shadows of the junk patrol cars, wedged between a rusted pickup and a hollowed-out school bus. I prayed they couldn't see me, but something told me they could. The men who brought them in moved to the back of the warehouse. One flipped a switch. The bay doors began to roll shut with a slow metallic groan, but they stopped just shy of closing completely, maybe 5 or 6 feet off the ground, enough to let in air, or maybe to let something else out. Then they left the girls alone, and in the silence that followed, the girls sat motionless, like artifacts on display, too exhausted to cry and too hopeless to run. Their heads drooped and their limbs, still bound, trembled subtly. Some stared at nothing. Others scanned the warehouse's rusted walls with the expression of someone already dreaming of escape. Then, all at once, their eyes locked with mine. It was almost imperceptible. No sudden movement, no gasp, just a shift, subtle, mechanical, instinctive, as their eyes aligned with mine, as if they'd known I was there. It weighs the whole time, as if they'd been waiting. Their gazes didn't move from me. They didn't dare turn their heads, didn't twitch or gesture or alert their handlers. They stayed perfectly still, communicating only through their eyes. A look passed between them, brief but barely perceptible, then back to me, and what I saw in their expressions wasn't malice or hunger. It was grief, unfiltered, soul-flattening grief, the kind you don't fake. The Gorgon girl sat with her knees pressed tightly together, her wrists zip-tied behind her back, shoulders curled forward like she was trying to hide her form. Her snakes no longer moved. They hung limp, defeated, as if they, too, had been broken. Her green skin was mottled now, blotched along her arms and thighs, and there were bruises and deep purple welts just below her bikini line. Her eyes locked on mine, and behind them, desperation. The succubus looked older, not by years, but by mileage. Her light red skin shimmered faintly under the light, not glittery but raw, like an open wound healing over. Her horns curved back like polished obsidian, beautiful but scarred. One chipped at the base, like it had been cracked with a blunt instrument. Her chest was bound by a framed bikini top that looked too tight, clearly not designed for comfort. Her lips moved slightly, whispering something I couldn't hear. The mermaid girl sat with her legs drawn up, feet tucked beneath her. Her blue-scaled skin looked drier than before, as though the air was hurting her. The edges of her gills twitched, struggling to take in oxygen, and her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her bikini top was damp in places, stained with something that didn't look like water. There were red rings around her wrists, deeper than the others, like she'd struggled the most. Her silver eyes welled with tears that never fell. And the fairy girl, she sat straight-backed, as if posture was all she had left. Her legs were crossed at the ankles, but the chain dug into her skin, leaving little bloody half-moons. Her skin was paler than the others, almost translucent now, the veins beneath glowing faintly blue in the dark. Her eyes, glimmering like diamonds, glinted as they found mine. She looked at me the longest. It wasn't hunger. It was recognition, like she knew who I was, or had known someone like me once. And still I didn't move. A part of me wanted to leap from the car and scream at the men, alert law enforcement, rush in there with a tire iron like some kind of bargain bin savior. But another part, deeper, colder, hesitated, because I knew things. I'd read the stories, the reports, the conspiracy threads. Succubi don't need consent. They drain you while you sleep. Medusas turn men to stone, sometimes only from the waist down. And mermaids? The old kind, the real kind? Much of mythology says they pulled sailors into the deep just to watch them drown. And lastly, not all fairies are benevolent. These women could have lured dozens to their deaths. Maybe more. Could I really afford to take my chances? But if that was true, if these weren't victims but predators, then who were those men? I glanced back at the warehouse. No insignias, no badges, no containment gear, just gloves and zip ties. Who do they work for anyway? If they were from the SCP Foundation or the Global Occult Coalition or whatever black budget monster hunting agency the internet whispered about, why were they here of all places? Why a rotting warehouse off I-95 in the industrial epicenter of North Miami? Why not a deep-sea lab or some forest bunker where no one could see? It didn't make sense. But it was more reason to believe that this wasn't containment. It was commerce. And I had a suspicion as to precisely what kind. My hands moved before my conscience could catch up. I pulled out my phone. My heart was still pounding, and didn't even bother opening Google. This wasn't something I'd find on Yelp. So I downloaded Tor, because whatever those girls were, they weren't the only ones being sold. And I guarantee you I wouldn't have found them anywhere else. Within minutes, I was browsing the dark web, and it wasn't long before I discovered the classifieds. I won't go into detail what else I came across. Just know I found what I was looking for. It surprisingly did not take too long. Within minutes, I was browsing escorts on an exclusive dark web forum, and I found women of various exotic subspecies on a website not normally accessible on Google. They had fairies, pixies, succubi, harpies, and even the bird-like sirens all available for rent on their site. They have clients of all kinds, ranging from human to non-human. Confirmed. My only question was, if they were being trafficked from other dimensions or worlds, then it would stand to reason that some kind of government agency would be watching stuff like this. Getting curious, I decided to look up the instructions needed to book a session. But before I could type a single letter, something happened. A low mechanical whine filled the air outside my vehicle. Coming from across the lot, I looked up from the phone to turn my gaze immediately upon the warehouse. I saw the door yawning open. Thick shadows peeled away as halogen lights spilled out from within, and there they were, the girls, all four of them, led out in single file like livestock. The two men from before, heavy-set, pale-skinned, wearing nondescript utility jackets, ushered them forward with quick mechanical hand gestures. I could hear faint commands muffled through the air. Keep your eyes down. Move. No noise. They didn't need to threaten. The girls were already broken in. Each of them was bound now. Not just zip ties around their wrists like before, but full restraints. Ankles shackled together with thick black iron cuffs. Arms trussed behind their backs with heavy leather belts. And this time, each one had a ball gag strapped into their mouths, tightly enough that their cheeks bulged and their breathing rasped through their nostrils. Their outfits, if you could even call them that, were degraded even further. Small bikini tops stretched taut across their chests, barely covering anything. Short shorts clung to their hips like afterthoughts, riding high between their thighs. They weren't costumes anymore. They were uniforms, assigned, dehumanizing. The Gorgon woman walked at the front. Her green skin shimmered slightly under the fluorescent light, and her snake hair writhed weakly, like it had been sedated. Her eyes scanned the area as she walked, darting left and right in brief jerks. She looked for an escape route. Maybe. I watched her gaze pass over the lot, and then it hit my car. Her pupils sharpened. Locked. Our eyes met. Behind her, the succubus shuffled forward, her crimson skin marked with bruises along her ribs. Her horns had been shaved down since I last saw her. Roughly, unevenly. A punishment, maybe. Her tail twitched behind her like it was trying to hide. The mermaid girl walked in stiff, halting steps, her webbed toes curled in shame. Her gills flared weakly with each shallow breath. Irritated from the dry air, she winced with every step, like the asphalt burned her feet. The fairy, or nymph-like girl, was the last to be loaded. She was tiny, no taller than 4 feet 11 inches, but the way she moved, the way her body trembled with each step, she looked even smaller, fragile, breakable. Her translucent wings had been cruelly pinned, folded tight against her back beneath a leather harness that pressed down hard, the wing joints visibly strained and twitching under the weight. Every few seconds, they fluttered instinctively, as if trying to open, only to be jerked back down by the restraint. They were loaded into a large white truck again. Same model as before, only now without the subtlety. The rear doors were wide open, revealing a padded interior with low red lights, a bench lining either side, and steel rings bolted to walls, anchor points. One by one, the girls were pushed up the small ramp and chained inside. The door slammed shut with the finality of a tomb. I made a decision. I threw my phone into the passenger seat and turned the key in the ignition. I didn't care about the form anymore. I needed to know where they were going. I pulled out slowly, keeping 3 car lengths behind the truck as it rolled out of the warehouse lot and onto the main road. I killed my headlights. The city was quiet this hour, nothing but low neon glows and the occasional flicker of a crosswalk sign. The truck didn't move fast, like it had no fear of being followed. It took me less than 10 minutes to realize where they were going. The Strip is just outside the Miami International Airport, a ring of sleazy motels, gas stations, hourly rate rooms, and concrete towers baking under yellow-orange street lamps. I passed a billboard advertising Fantasy Island Spa and another offering discounted companionship services. Every building seemed to lean sideways with mildew and regret. The truck pulled into the back lot of a 1-story motel that didn't even bother hiding its purpose. No signs, no lights, just faded brick and boarded-up windows. The kind of place where you checked in through a thick glass slot and never asked for towels. I parked again, this time behind a shuttered laundromat across the street. I watched the men open the back doors to the truck. First came the Gorgon woman again, still at the front. Her feet dragged as they pulled her out by the arm. She tried to resist, but her shackled legs gave her no leverage. One of the men shoved her forward, and she fell hard onto the gravel, the gag making a wet, choking thud against her lips. She whimpered, a sound I could barely hear, but felt in my teeth. The snakes on her head twitched frantically, like they were trying to fight back. Two men got out of the vehicle and hoisted her up. She walked gingerly on 2 feet barely covered with sandals, the two men guiding her up the paved sidewalk. The motel itself met every definition of seedy you could think of. It was only 1 story, and the building itself couldn't have had more than a dozen rooms carved into it. The overhead sign was gone, and the neon-lit vacancy light was only half lit. A single row of doors lit by flickering amber bulbs that hummed with bugs. The faded green paint peeling like sunburned skin, and security bars warped from age or misuse. The overhead sign was gone, torn off or collapsed long ago. Only a skeletal frame remained, rusted through and straining against the wind. Beneath it, a busted neon vacancy light glowed half-lit and stuttering, casting the letters VACCY across the parking lot like a joke no one was on. The place looked like it was functional, but barely. I saw them take the Gorgon woman to one of the doors. I faintly made out the number 12 just above as the door opened, and she was escorted inside. I looked back down at my phone and reopened the Tor browser. My eyes went to the unnamed website, where I found the escort services. I adjusted my location accordingly to Miami. I waited a few minutes, and then I found her. It was the Gorgon woman. I texted the number below. I waited a few more minutes before I got a response. The reply came in a green text bubble. Simple. Too simple. Room 12. Come alone. 100 per hour. Cash only. That was it. There was no name or greeting. Just a blunt set of instructions. It felt less like an invitation and more of a transaction. I stared at the message for a while. My thumb hovered over the screen. A part of me kept waiting for a second reply, or a clarification, or maybe even a joke, but that was wishful thinking at this point. I wanted a reason not to go in there, and there were too many to list. I wanted to believe that the Gorgon lady wanted to eat me or turn me into stone, but I just couldn't. I glanced back across the street. Room 12 was dark again. The window light had been clicked off. The only thing marking it from the other rooms was a faint, uneven scrawl of the number above the door, its paint chipping off. The parking lot was still empty. No cars, pedestrians, or other signs of life, except for a single curtain twitching in one of the rooms further down the row. I didn't like that. Someone was watching, or something was. I sat back in the seat and tried to breathe, but my lungs were tight. This wasn't curiosity anymore. Not really. It was something colder, heavier, like I'd seen too much already, and now I wasn't allowed to look away. No, I couldn't look away. I stared at the message again. Room 12. Come alone. 100 per hour. Cash only. I took a deep breath and exited my vehicle, making my way across the street and to the motel. I walked up to door number 12. I knocked twice. I technically was a brown belt in BJJ and had light striking skills with Taekwondo. So in that department, I had some kind of plan should someone want to get physical with me. After a few minutes, the door slowly opened and the Gorgon woman looked up at me. I saw that she was covered in a silky smooth, see-through bathrobe. She tucked a few snakes behind her ear as she let off a meek yet nervous smile. Please come in. I nodded as she took my hand and guided me into the room. Her hand was cold. Her 5 feet 2 inches frame. He gently guided my 5 feet 10 inches self to the bed. The snake's coil behind her ear twitched once more, as if whispering something I wasn't meant to hear. The door shut behind me with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have in the silence. The room was dimly lit, only by a bedside lamp with a cracked shade. The air was thick with a strange mix of scents. Cheap rose water, stale sweat, and perfume that had a rosy yet pungent odor. It was inviting, yet it stung my nostrils. There was no music or TV. Only the sounds of her and my breathing filled the room. She gently sat me down on the bed and stood over me. She then very slowly undid the sash, dropping to floor, letting the robe fall open. She was wearing a tight-fitting thong and a bra. It wasn't long before I noticed the cuts, bruises and welts along her body. Her eyes were heavy. "Are you okay?" She forced a smile and nodded. Then, straddling me on the bed, she began to ravish my neck, purring like a kitten. So strong, so handsome. She giggled. "I don't want to have sex." She then looked at me like I killed 10 people. I then picked her up and gently laid her on the bed. She sat up to look at me as I sat down next to her. "Can we talk?" She tilted her head. "Talk." I nodded. Her eyes went wide as she pressed her fingers to her temple. "T-talk? You want to talk?" I nodded. "To get to know you better." Her eyes widened as she just stared at me like I was the President of the United States. "Nobody has, I don't," she stammered and then shook her head. "Am not allowed to answer questions." I then heard a pounding on the door. "Alina, you better not be telling anyone anything about us," she heard someone scream. "Oh no, he sounds drunk," she raved and then turned to me. "You need to dash." The door slammed open and a tall man about my height came out. "You, outside. Me and the lady need to have a little talk." I glanced at the Gorgon woman. Now the fresh tears were streaming down her face as she clutched the blanket from the bed to her chest. I got up from the bed, frozen, and I just stared at the man, my stupid neurodivergence not knowing what to do. "Are you deaf?" "Leave now," he then stormed over to me. His breath hit my face, sour and hot, as he grabbed a fistful of my collar. My brain lagged for a split second, choking on the sudden pressure, the shouting, the chaos. And then everything snapped into place. I didn't think, I reacted. I went for a straight body lock and tackled him to the ground. I immediately got into position and executed a perfect heel hook. I dropped low, my arms wrapping around his midsection like coiled steel. A deep body lock. My hips turned, and I drove him backwards off his balance, tackling him hard onto the dirty motel floor with a hollow thump that shook the lampshade. We hit the ground. He tried to scramble, but I was already repositioning. I grabbed his leg, controlled the heel, dropped my weight sideways, and twisted. Fast, brutal, a perfect heel hook. There was a pop, then a scream. High-pitched, animal, involuntary. He flailed, slamming his fist on the floor, howling in raw, guttural pain as his knee exploded under the torque. I moved over to his head and executed an anaconda choke around his neck. He was out cold in seconds. I stood, chest heaving. The Gorgon woman was still on the bed, shaking, her snakes hissing low and defensive around her face, like a living halo. But she was staring at me differently now, with wide eyes filled with awe and admiration. "You dash," she stuttered. "You fought for me." I shrugged. "I guess I did what anyone would do." She let off a slight smirk, looking up at me like a lost child who just found her mother. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh, and a small, trembling smile curled at her lips. I turned to her, helping her off the floor. "Alina, we don't have much time." She took my hand slowly, like she was afraid she'd wake up if she moved too fast. Her fingers were cold and delicate, but they gripped mine like she didn't want to let go, a light smirk playing on her lips. I peeked out the door. I didn't see anyone. Then I turned back to Alina. "Can you walk?" I asked. "I think so." She then winced. Her balance swayed as she stood, her hand slapping against the wall to steady herself. "Then we're leaving. Right now." We stepped out into the heavy, damp night air. The parking lot was still empty. No headlights, no engines, no sign of the other traffickers. We both emerged from the room, but she was still wobbly, holding on to the doorframe for support. I turned back to her. "Ugh, my head," she said, holding a hand to her head. Without thinking, I moved back to her and swept her up into my arms. She was lighter than I expected, like she was made of silk and bone and smoke. Her arms instinctively wrapped around my neck, her face resting just under my chin. I felt her breath on my collarbone, soft yet shaky. The snakes on her head curled quietly, docile now, like they too had calmed. After a few steps, I felt her shift slightly in my arms. "You smell like..." Laundry detergent, she murmured, voice barely audible. I tilted my head. Is that a bad thing? It's warm, she said, slightly giggling. You're warm. I glanced down. Her cheeks had gone faintly pink, and she was staring up at me, eyelids heavy. That little smile returned, slightly drowsy but undeniably real. Something soft bloomed between us, buried beneath the fear and bruises and neon motel lights. As we walked over the car, she reached up with her hand to trace my jawline, her touch featherlight, like she wasn't sure I was solid. Her smile brightened, a flicker of something radiant breaking to the haze of everything she'd endured. I opened the passenger door for her. She hesitated only a moment before slipping in, curling up against the seat like it was the first real rest she'd had in days, maybe weeks. As I pulled away from the laundromat, the silence in the car felt different, not empty, just full of things we couldn't say yet. The city rolled past in blurred halos of orange and blue. Traffic lights blinked on empty corners. Planes cut across the sky far overhead, heading to places that still felt like fiction to people like us. Every now and then, I could feel her eyes on me, watching, studying, not in fear but in curiosity, like she was trying to memorize me. Each time I glanced over, she'd quickly look away, but not before I caught the edge of a smile playing on her lips. Outside, the streets of Miami drifted by, quiet and gleaming with midnight sheen. But inside that car, something had changed. This wasn't a rescue anymore. It wasn't survival. It was the start of something else. Something far more nefarious than a local escort ring. Story 10. I found a bunker in a storm drain. If you're reading this, that means I got a signal, and it was steady enough to upload. I figured I'd post on this subreddit because it was the first one I could reliably access. As the title suggests, I found a bunker in a storm drain near my town. It started as a dare. Some buddies and I were celebrating our first year of college behind us in summer, and we had a bonfire, music, some booze, and a non-zero amount of vandalism when we were partying up out by the campgrounds. Nothing too dangerous, just breaking bottles off the concrete drainage ditch for when the rainy season gets flowing, and spray, painting stupid shit on the already heavily tagged mouth of the storm drain. And one of my buddies got a bright idea to spray, hold shift to run, right at the entrance. We had gathered around the fire when that energy was burnt out and got to talking, just discussing summer plans and whether or not we were going to stay in town or tour the world or see any summer concerts. And one of my friends, Michael I think, suggested we do truth or dare, much to the mockery of the rest of the group. Most of it was quite tame, but once the initial hazing was over, Paul piped up and said, I dare Michael to hold his hand in the bonfire. And the game began. For the first hour we did a whole host of drunken shit. From climb that tree with your eyes closed to do a handstand on that fence. We were a veritable circus of dumb 20-somethings. When it was my turn, Vincent had picked the dare that got us here. I dare you to walk all the way to the end of the storm drain and back. I knew it wasn't really possible to walk all the way down. The drain went on for miles under the town and had metal grates to sift out general trash from the drain, but I accepted on condition that the whole group come with me. This obviously got met with some hesitance and mockery, but I twisted around to a courage test, and that they were cowards for not coming along for the ride, and to do it for posterity's sake, that we could mark the walls of how far we got before chickening out. They all came around after some promises that the last person out gets free booze for the rest of the summer from the others, and we collectively decided we would get together supplies and make good on the dare next week. The 5 of us recorded our pact on our phones and uploaded it on TikTok, so as not to allow anyone to back out, then went back to partying for the rest of the night. At the end of the week, the time had come, and Michael, Paul, Vincent, and myself had gathered all our supplies, packed with a journey to stay in the drain as long as possible. Being in mind, we got everything we could need in there. Granola bars, water bottles, road flares, spray paint, a couple GoPro cameras, sleeping bags, energy drinks, bolt cutters, a medical kit, headband flashlights for everyone, a Bluetooth speaker for tunes, portable chargers for our phones, 5 pocket knives for what Michael claimed self-defense in case of crazy homeless people, and an igloo cooler full of beer because Paul wanted to make the journey fun. The only person who didn't bring anything was Everett, but he explained it as, all I need is my wits and what's in my pockets. So we set out, and by nightfall we were at the mouth of the storm drain. We began with a ceremony of sorts, each of us recording a small video on our phones. Our last will, as we called it, how far we thought we could go. Everett said he would make it the furthest, claiming he was the manliest of us all, and that we're going to be giving him beer all summer long. Vincent said halfway because he thought there were grates in the way, and that the bolt cutters were pointless. So we should add a stipulation that we could also stay in the drain as long as we could go, and that it was not about how far we got, but how long we stayed. Everett called him a pussy, but after a group vote we allowed it. Paul said he'd make it as far as his cooler full of beer was cold, as unserious as ever. Michael made the claim that he would go as far as the bolt cutters would carry him, thinking that he could cut his way through any of the grates that Vincent would have been stopped by. I was last and said I'd go as far as I could before I ran out of battery. After our wills were recorded, we gathered and entered the mouth of the storm drain, taking one last look at the hold shift to run message that has somehow not been covered by the new graffiti messages that have since been made in the week before our excursion. At first, it was pretty standard for a walk down a drain. Some mud and trash and other grossness were obvious. Some more graffiti about what you'd expect in what is essentially a giant sewer pipe that prevents storms flooding the town. As we went deeper, we came to our first obstacle, but as Michael predicted, the bolt cutters got us through the cheap chain lock gate, and we began the steady climb up the slope to a cleaner section of the drain. There was still some muck and trash, and the slope was a bit slimy, but the only one of us who was struggling was Paul, because his beer cooler was unwieldy and still mostly full. We decided that if we found a dry section of the pipe, we would rest, record day 1 progress with some video testimonials, and figure out a sleeping arrangement, as the side areas of the pipe were covered in trash, and the main channel that the storm water flows through is always wet. We collectively decided that we need to find somewhere less gross to sleep, and continued up the pipe, where we came to a fork. One path looked like the rest of the pipe, and the other looked like a maintenance tunnel, lit by a single dim yellow bulb behind a cage. We reasoned that the access tunnel would be drier than the main path we'd been on, and as we climbed the steps we saw an industrial-looking door under the bulb. Upon checking to see if it was locked, we found a relatively cleaner room with enough space for us to lay out our sleeping bags. We took some video recordings and used some spray paint to mark the way out, before we were going to sleep for the night. The next morning we took inventory of everything, and began our second excursion. It felt like we walked for hours, and it was only made worse by Paul's bitching about how heavy his cooler was getting, and that we needed to slow down for him, resulting in Everett being a dick and using Paul's bitching as an excuse to leave the tunnel. However, when he went to leave, he saw it. Hey, what the fuck that? He shined his phone light at the wall, and there it was, a hatch. It looked old, and a rusted yellow sign above the door read B, 106/EW. We pulled on the lever to detach and heard a loud industrial clunk as the locks moved away from their bores, and the hatch opened with a hiss. Since Everett found it, he called dibs on whatever was inside, and to everyone's surprise, he began descending into the hatch before anyone could stop him. Michael followed after, with Vincent and myself next, leaving Paul fumbling with his cooler, before ultimately dropping it unceremoniously down the hatch and climbing down after it. We shone our lights down the new space, and saw there was some kind of bunker with shelves full of unlabeled cans and surprisingly dry cardboard boxes. There were posters on the wall. All of them looked like old propaganda from the 60s, with anti-communist slogans and images depicting various racist caricatures of Vietnamese people, Russians, Chinese, and Korean soldiers being slaughtered by U.S. soldiers in the name of freedom. As Paul reached the bottom of the ladder and lamented that his cooler had spilled out the rest of his beers, Everett began to pull down the posters as carefully as possible. Hey, help me take these down. I want to see if I can sell them on eBay. War memorabilia makes bank, especially if it's authentic. Vincent immediately jumped on board and used his pocket knife to pull the brittle paper off the adhesive that held on walls and rolled them up into his backpack, while Michael and I helped Paul load the Sunburst beer cans back into his cooler. We also took some video with the GoPros and our phones since Michael said he could edit the videos together and make an urban spelunking video for his channel. We considered going down one of the many branching paths within Bunker, but after some debate, we decided the best course of action was to sleep another night and explore further when we wake up. After all, no one wanted to be the booze jockey for the whole group for an entire summer. We took another testimonial video collection and then began to set up to sleep for the night. When we woke, Paul was missing, but his stuff was still down here. We assumed he woke up first and decided to just leave, so we didn't really think anything of it. And as I went back up the ladder to look for him, I noticed that the hatch was closed. What was more alarming was that it didn't have a way to open it from inside. Well, it did, but it was broken off by something. I knocked a couple times and called out to Paul. Maybe he was just playing a prank to scare us. He wouldn't really leave us here. Michael still owed him $20 for gas money to drive us out here. I let the other guys know, and while Everett seemed pissed off, he was kind of always like that, and Paul had left his cooler, which he wouldn't do unless he was going to come back for it. So we decided to continue into Bunker. Michael found a fuse box, and upon checking if any of the fuses worked, managed to get the power to the bunker on. Bright fluorescent lights came to life, along with the steady hum of an air unit, and a few muted electrical pops from decades-old technology suddenly being brought to life, making navigation much easier and save some battery life for our devices. As we moved deeper into Bunker, we saw many rooms that weren't of any real interest. A bunkhouse, a cafeteria, and a crappy little recreational room with a false window showing a picture of a farm, backlit by a flickering light long past its replacement date. We took more footage of everything, and even did some dumb skits like Bunker Cooking Channel, where we prepared the food from the bunker line, those TV chefs, and my 60s living room, where we made fun of those old sitcoms that were set in the shag carpet and multicolored hellscape. That was the 60s home decor. Eventually we got tired and went to sleep in the bunk room. Paul would probably come back and let us out, and we'd tell him that since he was the first out, he'd have to honor the contract and get us all drinks for a summer. But when we went up to the hatch again, it was still firmly in place. We decided to go back down the hall and check the other rooms. We found a radio room and a strange heavy metal door that had a keypad to open it. We didn't have a code, and we figured that it must be somewhere down here, maybe in that radio room, but we wanted out. If we continued looking for a way out, we might find a back exit. Bunkers had to have a second way out, right? We kept searching until we were exhausted. We found a shower and bathroom, so we had our basic needs covered. But every time we looked for a way to contact the outside world, we were met with no cell service, let alone internet access. Vincent thought we could use the radio room, but Everett said that we might get arrested because we weren't supposed to be in the bunker to begin with. After all, there was a reason it was sealed shut in the storm drain, and being a dickhead about it. He did have a point. We reasoned that if we ran out of our food and water and Paul didn't come back, we would use the radio and only if we were seriously stuck. Until then, we're going to look for something to tell us about what this place used to be, maybe a map with a way out. That brings us to now. In the corner of the recreation room, up by the air vent, there's a faint signal, so I'm asking you all for help on ways to get out of here. And Paul, if you're reading this, please, you have to come back and open the hatch. You can forget about the contract. None of us care anymore. We just want out of the bunker.